Atheist teacher bullies Christian girl in class, unaware she's the daughter of the mayor. She walked into class like it was just another normal day, but today, something was different. The teacher's comments started feeling meaner, and she kept looking at the small silver cross she wore around her neck. She probably thought she was just another student he could pick on. But what she didn't know was that she was the mayor's daughter, and today was about to take a surprising turn. Day 1. The sun streamed through the tall windows of Ridgewood High School, casting long shadows across the bustling hallway. Students moved between classes, some chatting in groups while others rushed to their lockers, laughter and chatter filling the air. For Sarah Thompson, a quiet and reserved junior, today was supposed to be just another day at school. Sarah was always a reserved child, keeping herself out of the drama and scored good grades in general. As she took her seat, she adjusted her silver cross necklace, which was a habit of comfort for her. While the students settled down around her, Miss Evans, a tall, somewhat strict computer science teacher, stood up to address the class. Miss Evans was known to be strict and sometimes a bit cold, but most of all, for her absolute belief in science.
All right, class. Today we'll be studying computer algorithms, something that runs purely on logic and not on old-fashioned fairy tales.
Miss Evans's eyes linger on Sarah. She feels her face turning warm, aware that the teacher was indirectly mocking her faith. She slouches a bit and tries to avoid the teacher's gaze. Miss Evans turns to the board and starts writing the chapter name while Sarah continues to hold on to her necklace and silently listen. It was clear that the atmosphere in the classroom shifted as other students also moved uncomfortably in their seats. Little did Sarah know that her world was going to take a hurtful turn. As the lesson went on, Miss Evans switched to the topic of critical thinking, trying to establish its link with computer algorithms.
Do you know why it's so crucial to question everything, especially the things that people accept without any evidence?
She asked, with her tone taking on an edge that Sarah hadn't had before. Her words, though seemingly general, felt aimed directly at Sarah.
Belief is a funny thing.
Her gaze drifting to Sarah's necklace once more.
Some people still rely on outdated myths or stories, clinging to them like they're some sort of guide to life. Isn't that strange?
Sarah quickly looked down, gripping her pen tightly. At this point, the tension inside the classroom could be cut with a knife. Around her, she could feel the subtle shift of eyes as a few students glanced her way, some looking uneasy, while others grinning, anticipating the drama that was unfolding before their eyes. Throughout the lesson, Miss Evans continued to use these indirect digs into her teaching. Every time she mentioned belief, trust, or the value of science, she seemed to add a little extra edge, a hint of ridicule that left Sarah feeling more isolated with each passing minute. This wasn't all though, as Sarah's day soon turned from bad to worse in a matter of minutes. As the class ended, Sarah gathered her things slowly, hoping to avoid any more attention. But as she moved towards the door, Miss Evans called out to her.
Sarah, do you ever wonder if some things that people believe in might be a little silly?
She asked with a notorious smile on her face. Sarah felt her heart drop and her hands and feet running cold. All she wanted to do at the moment was to run home. She stuttered,
I'm not sure, Ms. Evans.
Before mildly escaping her eyes. Day 2. The next day, Sarah walked into class with a heavy heart, dreading what Miss Evans might say next. She adjusted her necklace, a small reassuring gesture that gave her a tiny bit of strength. But as she sat down, she noticed Miss Evans watching her again, a faint smirk on her face.
Today, we're diving into one of my favorite subjects, artificial intelligence and programming logic.
She announced to the class.
Computers only follow facts and logic. They don't leave room for beliefs or feelings. That's what makes them so efficient.
Miss Evans turned to the board, writing "Logic versus Belief" at the top. She then launched into a lecture on how computers operate strictly within the bounds of programming. Computers require clear, factual inputs to produce accurate outputs, and she focused on this point repeatedly. She started scanning the room to engage with the class and prove her point, and conveniently enough, it landed on Sarah.
Sarah,
she said, her tone sharp.
What do you think? Is it reasonable to believe in things without any proof?
Sarah looked up, her cheeks flushing. She knew Miss Evans was baiting her, trying to get her to reveal her beliefs so she could make a point. Swallowing her nervousness, she answered as honestly as she could.
I think sometimes people believe in things because it gives them hope,
she said softly. Miss Evans raised an eyebrow, a mocking smile tugging at her lips.
Hope? Or ignorance?
She replied, the disdain in her voice clear. I suppose it depends on how you look at it.
Imagine if computers ran on faith or hope,
she said, her gaze drifting pointedly towards Sarah.
We'd have chaos. They would break down, become unreliable, make random errors. Can you imagine a computer trusting things without solid logic?
Sarah felt herself sink further into her seat. Around her, a few classmates glanced her way, aware of the double meaning in Miss Evans's words. She tried to focus on taking notes, but the words kept echoing in her mind, making it hard to concentrate. During the break, Sarah found a quiet corner in the hallway, struggling to hold back tears. Her friend, Emily, a kind and passionate girl with a gift for picking up on people's emotions, found her there, sitting alone. Emily was Sarah's closest friend, known for her warm heart and the way she always seemed to know when someone needed a little encouragement. She was the type of friend who would listen without judgment and offer support whenever it was needed.
Sarah, are you okay?
Emily asked, her voice full of concern. Sarah managed a small nod, wiping her eyes quickly.
It's just, Ms. Evans keeps saying these things, making it clear that she thinks my beliefs are silly. I feel like she's targeting me,
Sarah confessed, her voice shaky. Emily's face turned serious.
That's not right, Sarah. She's supposed to be a teacher, not someone who makes you feel bad for who you are.
Although Miss Evans didn't know of Sarah's father, the rest of the class did.
Sarah, maybe you should try talking to your...
Before Emily could finish, Sarah interrupted in a displeased tone.
No, Emily, I really don't want to involve my dad in this.
Sarah hated special treatment and hence kept her school life and her private life separate.
I think I'm going to talk to Ms. Evans about this before taking it up to anyone else. I think a face-to-face conversation is what's needed,
said Sarah with a serious tone. Emily nodded and hugged her friend to comfort and reassure her. Little did they know that Miss Evans wasn't the person they believed her to be, and Sarah's efforts were about to be in vain. This confrontation would scar Sarah for life. Sarah confronts the teacher. As Sarah walked toward the staff room to talk to Miss Evans, her heart was pounding. She felt scared, and a big part of her just wanted to turn around and avoid the whole thing. Confronting Miss Evans was intimidating, and Sarah wasn't sure if she was really brave enough to do it. She stopped just outside the door and held onto her silver cross, feeling its cool metal in her hand. She closed her eyes and remembered a verse her grandmother used to tell her when she was nervous.
Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
Repeating those words to herself, Sarah felt a bit calmer, like a warm strength filling her heart. She realized that her faith, which Miss Evans had made fun of, was actually giving her the courage she needed. She reminded herself that she wasn't doing this just for herself, she was standing up for what was right. Taking a deep breath, Sarah lifted her head, let go of the cross and walked into the staff room. She felt stronger now, ready to talk to Miss Evans, knowing her faith was with her every step of the way. When she opened the door, she spotted Miss Evans seated at a table, sipping coffee and marking papers. She looked up, clearly surprised to see a student there.
Sarah? The staff room is for teachers, you know. Is there something you need?
Asked Miss Evans in a dismissive attitude. Taking a deep breath, Sarah walked over, her voice steady but tense.
Ms. Evans, I wanted to talk to you about the things you've been saying in class. The comments you make about people who believe in things that aren't logical. You keep looking at me when you say those things. It's making me really uncomfortable.
Miss Evans raised an eyebrow, leaning back in her chair as a smirk formed on her face. She could clearly see that Sarah was hurt by her remarks, but could also see that Sarah was extremely nervous. She knew that as long as she stood her ground, Sarah wouldn't be able to prove her point and decided to take advantage of this.
Oh, Sarah. I think you're taking things a bit too personally. I'm not targeting you. I'm merely encouraging critical thinking. Logical thinking means letting go of, well, certain ideas that have no basis in reality. If you're feeling uncomfortable, that's not on me.
Sarah knew that Miss Evans was never going to admit her behavior. However, since she had made it all the way to confront Miss Evans, Sarah gave it one more shot.
But it feels like you're implying that people who have faith are somehow less intelligent or weak. It's not right to say things like that in front of everyone,
she said shakily. Miss Evans scoffed, her tone turning condescending as she waved her hand.
Listen, Sarah, I'm here to teach my students to think logically, not to cater to everyone's personal beliefs. If you're going to get upset every time I mention logic, maybe my class isn't for you. Perhaps you should consider whether this environment is something you can handle.
Sarah felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of anger and hurt swelling within her. She stood there searching for words, but Miss Evans's face showed no signs of empathy or understanding. Realizing nothing she said would make her attitude change, she turned and left the staff room, her frustration bubbling over. Revelation to Dad. After another uncomfortable class filled with Miss Evans's thinly veiled jabs at her faith and her confrontation with Miss Evans going very wrong, Sarah felt sadness building up inside of her. She realized that Miss Evans's behavior towards her was getting out of hand, but didn't know how to deal with it. You see, Sarah wasn't the type of kid who used her privilege to get out of her situation. She had a sense of independence in her ever since she was a child, and she wanted to handle the situation herself. However, an anxious and emotionally drained Sarah couldn't think of anything to help her get out of this mess. That evening, as she sat at the dinner table, her father, Mayor Thompson, immediately noticed her unusually quiet demeanor.
Sarah, honey, you seem down. Did something happen at school?
He asked, his voice filled with concern. Mayor Thompson was a kind and considerate man to everyone, but he had an even softer side for his only daughter, Sarah.
Come on, honey, I know that you love dealing with everything by yourself, but you do know that I'm here to help you with anything, right?
These words were so reassuring and comforting to Sarah. Although she was initially hesitant to bring this up to her dad, she decided it was time to share what she'd been experiencing.
Dad, my teacher, Ms. Evans, she keeps making fun of me. It's like she's targeting me for my faith.
She explained, her voice wavering.
She says things in class, like how only facts matter and that belief is for people who don't know any better.
Mr. Thompson couldn't believe what he was hearing. His expression turned from a gentle smile to one with rage. Being a practicing Christian himself, it wasn't the mockery of his religion that bothered him the most, but rather the manner in which a high school teacher was targeting and discriminating against students based on their faith. He kept listening to Sarah's story with his eyebrows knit together and his face turning red as the story continued.
Have you confronted anyone about this, Sarah?
He asked out of concern.
Yes, Dad, I talked directly to Ms. Evans today. Her response was, well, it was beyond condescending and rude,
said Sarah, looking down, unable to face her dad. As Sarah concluded her story, Mr. Thompson didn't know what to say or how to react. He was downright furious that a teacher could discriminate based on religion, and the thought of the student being his daughter didn't sit right with him. After a couple of minutes to calm down and collect his thoughts, he finally spoke to Sarah.
Sarah, that's completely unacceptable,
he said, his tone firm.
No teacher has the right to treat you or anyone with such disrespect. I'll make sure something is done about this.
Without another word, Mayor Thompson picked up the phone and called the principal of Ridgewood High, Mr. Adams. After a brief introduction, he went straight to the point, describing how Miss Evans's behavior was affecting Sarah. Moreover, Mayor Thompson emphasized on how a teacher, of all people, is discriminating against students and how it sets a bad role model for them.
Let me be very clear, Principal Adams. I don't want an apology note or a slap on the wrist. I want to know what action you're planning to take to make sure no student, and I mean no student, is ever made to feel like my daughter has felt in Ms. Evans' class. And I expect to hear back from you tomorrow with a clear plan.
Mr. Thompson, I apologize deeply for what Sarah has been going through. This is certainly not how we expect our staff to treat students. I assure you, this matter will be addressed promptly, and I will personally handle it first thing tomorrow morning,"
he said. Confrontation day. As Sarah approached her classroom the next day, her heart was beating out of her chest. Although she was relieved that Miss Evans would finally be put in her place, she was nervous about the confrontation that was about to take place in front of her eyes, not to mention that this drama would bring a lot of attention to her. She swiftly enters the class and takes her regular seat. As the students were settling down to their seats, Miss Evans stood up to address the class. She starts scanning the room and notices Sarah again, holding onto her silver cross while murmuring beneath her breath. Her face turns into a sly smile as she cooks up an insult to belittle Sarah once again. Who would have thought that this day would be one of the most embarrassing days of her life? Before Miss Evans opens her mouth and starts speaking, Mr. Adams burst into the classroom. Sarah started tapping her desk nervously, preparing herself for the worst. The students were surprised to see Principal Adams enter Miss Evans's classroom during the first period. His face was set in a serious expression and his voice held a firm authority that commanded the room.
"Ms. Evans, I need to discuss something with you, right here in front of your students."
Miss Evans straightened, trying to mask her unease. She glanced around the room, then faced Principal Adams with a defensive expression. "Is there a problem, Principal Adams?" she asked in a confused yet arrogant tone.
"Yes, there is. I've received a complaint regarding your behavior in this classroom. It has been brought to my attention that you have made repeated derogatory comments toward a student based on her personal belief,"
said Principal Adams firmly. A range of thoughts started crossing her mind. Mind you, this wasn't the first time Miss Evans was picking on kids who went against her personal beliefs. However, none of them had ever confronted her about it, let alone take it up to the principal. Her eyes immediately shot at Sarah, who avoided eye contact and looked at Mr. Adams. Miss Evans knew that she had to defend herself as her reputation and job was on the line.
I think there's some misunderstanding here. I've done nothing but teach this class as I always do, which is encouraging critical thinking and challenging students to think logically. I'm not targeting anyone personally, sir,"
said Miss Evans with a steady stance. Although a sense of nervousness was shooting up her body, she knew how to keep herself composed under pressure.
"A misunderstanding. Miss Evans, this isn't just a casual complaint. Mayor Thompson himself called me about this,"
Principal Adams said with a tone of annoyance. A look of shock crossed Miss Evans's face as the weight of Principal Adams's words hit her. Her mind raced as she realized that Sarah, the student she'd repeatedly targeted with her comments, was the mayor's daughter.
The mayor's daughter? How come I was never warned about her?
She thought to herself. Her face went pale, a look of shock overtaking her features. She hadn't anticipated that her behavior would reach anyone outside the classroom.
Wait, the mayor? Sarah is... I had no idea she was his daughter.
Miss Evans was stuttering really bad. She was trying to compose herself, but her confidence had visibly shattered. Before she could finish her sentence, Principal Adams cut her off.
"It shouldn't matter who her father is, Ms. Evans. No student should feel targeted in any classroom, but you went out of your way to make Sarah feel uncomfortable, repeatedly questioning her beliefs and using them to make a point in front of the class."
Miss Evans's world came crashing down. She could feel her feet shivering beneath the ground. However, her ego couldn't let her accept her mistake. She tried to defend herself one more time, but things seemed grim.
I was just trying to encourage open thinking. I didn't mean to offend anyone.
Principal Adams was now furious. Not only had Miss Evans committed a serious violation of the school rules and ruined the school's reputation in front of Mayor Thompson, but she was now trying to justify her actions without any sort of remorse. In an angry and firmer tone, Principal Adams faced Miss Evans and said,
"Encouraging open thinking doesn't mean belittling a student's beliefs, nor does it involve making them feel unwelcome. Your role is to create a safe and respectful environment for every student, Ms. Evans. But instead, you chose to single Sarah out, to mock her beliefs, and to make her feel isolated in front of her peers."
The students watched in silence as the spectacle unraveled before them. The weight of Principal Adams's words started sinking in. The atmosphere was serious, with some students glancing at each other while others looked down, not knowing how to react. Sarah, on the other hand, felt a mixture of emotions take over her. Her nervousness started to fade away and she felt a sense of relief and validation as Principal Adams stood up for her. However, she couldn't help but wonder if Miss Evans would be biased towards her in the future because of this incident.
At Ridgewood High, we do not tolerate discrimination or disrespect of any kind, especially from a teacher. By targeting Sarah's faith, you not only acted unprofessionally, but also showed obvious neglect for the respect we expect in this school. And to make matters worse, you targeted the mayor's daughter, a fact that makes this situation all the more serious.
Principal Adams said while looking straight at Miss Evans. Miss Evans tried to interject, her voice faltering.
I didn't mean for it to come across that way.
Intentions aside, the impact is clear. Your remarks have caused harm. As of today, you are officially reprimanded for your conduct. Furthermore, I expect to see a written apology addressed to Sarah and her family by the end of the day, and I will personally review it before it's sent.
Concluded Principal Adams in a calmer tone than before. Miss Evans' shoulders slumped as the reality of her actions sank in. She nodded, too stunned to respond further, realizing that her position was now in jeopardy. With a final, firm nod to Sarah, Principal Adams left the room, leaving Miss Evans standing alone in front of the class of silent, wide-eyed students. After Principal Adams left, Miss Evans struggled to regain her composure. Her usual tone and bravado were gone as she quietly resumed the lesson, noticeably shaken. Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders, grateful for her father's support and the principal's strong stance. That afternoon, Miss Evans sat at her desk, still processing the morning's events. Never in a million years would she have guessed that Sarah, a soft-spoken and reserved girl, would be the daughter of the mayor. Moreover, a sense of guiltiness and remorse filled inside of her. Despite being a firm believer of science and skeptic of religion, she knew that disrespecting someone else's belief was beyond wrong. Realizing the severity of her actions, she began to write a formal letter of apology addressed to Mayor Thompson, carefully choosing her words. Miss Evans submitted the letter to Principal Adams, who reviewed it and passed it along to Mayor Thompson. Sarah read the letter with her father, feeling a sense of closure and relief.
See? As simple as that. You happy now, darling?
Said Mr. Thompson to Sarah, lovingly putting a hand over her shoulder. Sarah looked up to her dad and smiled, feeling grateful that there was someone she could turn to in times of distress. In the weeks following the confrontation, Ridgewood High felt like a different place. Students whispered about what had happened in Miss Evans' class, and the word of the principal's firm stance quickly made its way through the school. Some students who had previously kept quiet about feeling belittled now felt empowered to speak up, while teachers became more mindful about the boundaries between their personal beliefs and the responsibilities as educators. Miss Evans, meanwhile, had a noticeable shift in demeanor. She kept her head down, focused on her lessons, and avoided any personal remarks. For the first time, she seemed genuinely open to student perspectives, asking questions and listening rather than imposing her views. Though she remained a firm teacher, her ego had deflated, replaced with a professionalism that surprised even the toughest critics. Later that week, Miss Evans approached Sarah quietly after class.
Sarah, may I have a word?
Miss Evans' voice was softer than usual. She took a deep breath.
I want you to know I'm genuinely sorry for how I treated you. It was wrong of me to make you feel uncomfortable because of your beliefs. I didn't see it before, but I realize now that everyone has a right to what they hold dear. I hope you can forgive me.
Sarah, taken aback, managed a small smile.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. I really appreciate it.
The two shared a brief but sincere moment of understanding, and Miss Evans left with a renewed sense of responsibility toward her students. One afternoon, Sarah received a handwritten note in her locker. The neat script read,
"Thank you for standing up for yourself. You've inspired more people than you know."
There was no name, but the words left her smiling all day. She had learned something invaluable. Standing up for her beliefs hadn't just protected her own dignity, but it had ignited a ripple effect, making Ridgewood High a place where everyone felt a little braver, a little stronger.